The air was thick with the stench of oil and smoke. Ro darted between crumbling buildings, heart pounding, eyes scanning the alleyways for any sign of food. The once glorious Zorathians had ruled these streets, now they were ghosts, reduced to nothing more than a memory. And here Ro was, scrounging through rubble like a common vermin. Weak. Worthless. The words of the larger, more powerful species echoed in Ro's head. Zorathians were once feared, known for their brutal strength and ruthless efficiency in battle. But Ro didn't have that strength. Born frail and small, like the rest of the new generation, Ro's kind had been discarded. There was no room for the weak in a galaxy that worshipped power. The cold metal of a half-crushed ration pack caught Ro's eye. Snatching it up, the child frantically ripped it open, only to find it empty. With a soft, defeated sigh, Ro slumped against the alley wall, knees drawn up to a chest that still ached from the last beating. A group of alien teenagers rounded the corner, their hulking frames casting long shadows over the street. They didn't even look twice at Ro as they passed, laughing and tossing insults at other passers-by. Their disregard was almost worse than their aggression. At least when they bullied Ro, they acknowledged the child's existence. But not today. Today, Ro was invisible. Closing eyes to the world, Ro wondered if that was the better fate, fading into the background, unseen and forgotten. The galaxy was vast, full of species with immense power, technology beyond comprehension, and fleets that could wipe out entire worlds. And here Ro sat, a helpless Zorathian child, without a future, without hope. A distant explosion shook the ground, and Ro flinched instinctively. It was the same every day, conflict after conflict, power struggles between empires and factions. In this galactic hub, war was constant, but it was a war fought by those who had already won. The strong crushed the weak, and the weak, well, they scavenged in the dirt. Ro had grown numb to it. The sound of ships overhead, the distant shouts of soldiers, it was all just background noise now. But then, something different. Footsteps, heavy, deliberate, and coming closer. Ro opened their eyes and peered around the corner. A squad of soldiers, dressed in mismatched armor, moved through the streets. Their uniforms were different from the others, less polished, more practical. They weren't the hulking brutes from the other factions. These were humans, a species Ro had only heard rumors about. Humans weren't known for their physical strength or advanced technology. In fact, many species in the galaxy viewed them as barely above average, functional, but not remarkable in any significant way. Some even mocked them for their simplicity. And yet there they were, moving with purpose, eyes scanning the streets, weapons ready but not drawn. Ro shrank further into the shadows. The humans were talking among themselves, their voices low but filled with tension. Something about them seemed different, though. Unlike the others, their movements weren't hostile. Their eyes didn't burn with the cold indifference Ro had seen so often in the streets. Then, one of them stopped. He was taller than the others, older, with streaks of gray in his hair. His face, though worn by years of battle, held an expression that was hard to place. Tired, yes, but not cruel. Ro pressed deeper into the shadows, heart racing. The soldier's gaze swept across the alley, and for a moment their eyes met. Ro's breath caught in their throat. The man's expression softened just slightly, enough to make Ro hesitate. But the moment was broken when another human soldier approached, shaking his head. "Just leave it," the soldier muttered. "It's not worth it. We've got a mission." The older man glanced at Ro once more, and for a second, it seemed like he might walk away. Maybe he'd ignore Ro like everyone else had. Maybe this would be just another encounter where the strong passed by, and the weak were left behind. But then, the man sighed, and against the protests of his companion, he stepped forward. Ro tensed, ready to bolt, but the man didn't reach for his weapon. Instead, he crouched down to Ro's level, his face calm but firm. He didn't say anything at first, just watched, as if waiting for Ro to make the first move. The silence stretched between them, tense and uncertain. "What's your name?" the man finally asked, his voice surprisingly gentle. Ro said nothing, eyes darting between the soldier's face and the blaster at his side. The man followed Ro's gaze and shook his head. I'm not going to hurt you, kid, he said, soft but serious. But you can't stay here. It's not safe. Ro's mind raced. It was a trick. It had to be. No one helped the weak. No one helped Zorathians anymore. Seeing the doubt in Ro's eyes, the man sighed again and stood up, reaching into his pack. He pulled out a small ration bar and set it on the ground between them. Take it or leave it, he said, stepping back to give Ro space. But if you want more, you'll need to come with us. Ro's stomach growled, the hunger gnawing like a wild beast. Eyes locked on the food, Ro hesitated, glancing up at the soldier again. He didn't move, didn't push, just waited. For a long moment, Ro debated. The galaxy was cruel, everyone knew that. Trusting anyone was dangerous, especially humans. But Ro was tired. Tired of running, tired of hiding, tired of being alone. And the soldier, there was something about him, something that made Ro want to believe. With a shaky hand, Ro reached out and grabbed the ration bar, tearing it open and taking a cautious bite. The flavor was bland, but to Ro, it was the best thing they'd tasted in days. The soldier smiled, just a small, sad smile, and nodded to the rest of his crew. We're moving out. Keep your eyes open. As the soldiers started to leave, the man turned back to Ro one last time, extending his hand. Ro stared at it, unsure, but something in the man's eyes, something kind, made the decision. Slowly, cautiously, Ro took the man's hand. And for the first time in a long while, the child didn't feel so alone. Ro had never seen the inside of a human ship before. It was different from the sleek, intimidating vessels of other species, less polished, more functional. The walls hummed with a low, steady energy as the crew moved about, their footsteps echoing lightly in the corridors. It felt alive, in a way that Ro hadn't expected. There was no grandeur, no cold indifference, just a quiet sense of purpose. The crew was smaller than Ro had imagined, barely a dozen humans, each one focused but not hostile. They didn't speak to Ro, didn't push for interaction, just let the child be. In a way, their silence was comforting. It wasn't the forced isolation of the streets, but a respectful distance. Lieutenant Carter, the older man who had found Ro, was busy at the command center, his attention divided between incoming transmissions and the navigational displays. His sharp eyes flickered now and then towards Ro, but he didn't say much. He didn't have to. His presence was enough, steady and dependable, like a quiet anchor in the chaos of the universe. Ro sat quietly in the corner of the room, clutching the blanket one of the crew had handed over. It wasn't much, but it was more comfort than Ro had known in months. The child's body ached, bruises still fresh from the last attack, but it was the exhaustion that pressed down the hardest, the weariness that had settled deep into Ro's bones after days, weeks, maybe even months of surviving alone. But here, on this ship, there was something different. Safety. The humans didn't ask for anything in return, didn't demand submission or loyalty. They just helped. It was disorienting. How are you holding up? Carter's voice cut through the quiet hum of the ship. He had approached without Ro noticing, his eyes softened but sharp, taking in the child's slouched form. Ro didn't answer at first, unsure of what to say. The question itself seemed foreign. How was Ro holding up? In a galaxy that had forgotten the Zorathians, the question felt irrelevant. Weakness was supposed to be ignored, not addressed. Fine, Ro mumbled, hugging the blanket tighter. Carter crouched down, bringing himself to eye level with Ro. I know you've been through a lot, kid. You don't have to pretend. Ro flinched slightly at the directness of his words. No one had spoken like that before. Everyone in the galaxy pretended they didn't see suffering, pretended they were stronger than they were, pretended the weak didn't exist. But Carter wasn't pretending. I don't know what to do, Ro admitted, the words coming out in a hoarse whisper. Carter nodded, not pushing any further. That's okay. We'll figure it out together. He stood up and motioned for Ro to follow him. The ship hummed gently under their feet as they made their way to a quieter part of the vessel. A training room, sparsely equipped but functional, opened up before them. Rose stared at the equipment, confused. "Why are we here?" Ro asked, eyeing the weights and mats uneasily. Physical training was for the strong, for those who still had a place in the galaxy. Ro wasn't one of them. Carter gestured to the room with a faint smile. "We've got a saying back on Earth: when you don't know what to do, you move. You act. Doesn't matter how small the step is. It gets your mind clear." Ro looked skeptical but followed Carter inside. The space was quiet, save for the low hum of the ship around them. Carter walked to the center of the room and turned to face Ro. "Before the Zorathians were known for their strength, they were known for their strategy, their intelligence," Carter said, his voice steady but carrying weight. "That's the real power, kid. Not just brute force. You don't have to be the strongest. You just have to be smart." Ro's eyes flickered with the faintest trace of curiosity. It was the first time in a long while someone had mentioned the intelligence of the Zorathians. All anyone ever talked about was their failure to maintain their warrior legacy. "How?" Ro asked, hesitant but curious. Carter smiled, a soft, knowing smile. "We humans may not be the strongest species out there, but we know how to survive. We adapt. We think on our feet." He began showing Ro's simple movements, nothing too intense, just basic stances, ways to stay grounded and centered. It wasn't about fighting, not yet. It was about balance, about finding stability in a galaxy that offered none. Ro mimicked the movements, clumsy at first, unsure of how to hold their body. But Carter didn't push, didn't demand perfection. He was patient, his movements fluid and controlled, a stark contrast to the chaos that usually surrounded Ro. "It's not about being better than someone else," Carter said quietly as Rose stumbled slightly. "It's about being better than you were yesterday." The words hung in the air, sinking into Rose's mind. It wasn't a concept the child had ever considered before. Improvement, not for dominance or survival, but for oneself. For a future that wasn't dictated by the galaxy's harsh rules. As they continued, Ro found the movements becoming more natural. The pain in their limbs lessened, replaced by a strange sense of control. It wasn't much, but it was something. And in that moment, surrounded by a crew of humans who asked for nothing in return, Ro felt the faintest flicker of something unfamiliar: hope. They didn't have to be strong like the Zorathians of old. They didn't have to live up to a legacy of power and domination. There was another way. Another path. When the session ended, Carter handed Ro a small ration bar, just like the one he had offered in the alley. But this time, Ro didn't hesitate. The child took it, nodding in quiet gratitude. "You did good today," Carter said, his voice gentle but firm. "We'll keep at it. One step at a time." Ro looked up at him, the weight of the past still heavy on their shoulders but beginning to lift, just slightly. "Why are you helping me?" Ro asked, the question finally breaking free from the confusion that had been swirling in their minds since the moment Carter had first found them. Carter paused, considering his words carefully. "Because we can't just leave people behind, kid. That's not who we are." Ro didn't respond, but something in the way the child's shoulders relaxed suggested that the answer was enough. For now. As they walked back through the ship's corridors, Ro still clutching the small ration bar, there was a quiet understanding between them. A promise, unspoken but felt. Maybe, just maybe, there was more to the galaxy than the brutal laws of survival that Ro had known for so long. Maybe there was a place for the weak, the forgotten, the abandoned. And maybe, with the humans, Ro could find it. Days passed, and Ro slowly adjusted to life among the humans. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't fast. Trust, Ro had learned, was something fragile, something that could break at any moment. But the humans didn't rush. They gave Ro time, space, and more importantly, they gave the child respect. No one pried too deeply into Ro's past. No one pushed for answers. The humans seemed to understand that survival was enough for now. Lieutenant Carter kept his word. Every day, he spent a little more time with Ro, teaching simple but valuable skills: how to defend, how to think strategically, how to survive without resorting to brute force. Ro absorbed it all. The child's mind, though burdened by fear and distrust, was sharp. Quick. And Carter saw that. "You're a fast learner," Carter said one afternoon, after a particularly challenging session. Sweat dripped from both of them, but the exhaustion felt earned, not defeating. Ro wiped a hand across their brow, trying to hide the flicker of pride that rose at the compliment. "It's not just about fighting," Carter continued. "It's about knowing when not to fight. You're not like other Zorathians, Ro. That's a strength, not a weakness." Ro frowned, still not entirely convinced. All their life, the Zorathians had been defined by their strength, their ability to dominate in combat. But that way of life had crumbled, leaving only the broken remnants behind. Ro had seen it firsthand, the fall of a proud species, reduced to scraps and exile. "I don't know what I am," Ro admitted quietly. It was a thought that had gnawed at the child for some time now. The Zorathians had failed, and Ro didn't fit into the mold of strength they had left behind. "If I'm not strong like them, then what's the point?" Carter was silent for a moment, as if considering how best to answer. His brow furrowed slightly, not in frustration but in thought. Finally he spoke, his voice calm but steady. "The galaxy has a funny way of making people think strength is the only thing that matters. But it's not. The Zorathians, they lost their way. They forgot that strength isn't just about muscles and power. It's about resilience. Adaptability." Ro didn't say anything, but the words lingered. Strength wasn't just about brute force. That was a concept that was hard to accept. For so long, Ro had believed that power, or the lack of it, defined worth. But the humans didn't seem to operate on those rules. And for the first time, Ro began to wonder if maybe the galaxy had been wrong all along. "You've got something most species don't," Carter continued, gesturing to Ro with an almost casual wave. "You're smart. You've survived on your own in one of the toughest places in the galaxy. That takes more than just strength, Ro. It takes brains. And heart." Ro looked at Carter, searching his expression for any hint of deception, but there was none. The human was genuine. Uncomplicated in a way that baffled Ro, who had grown used to the web of lies and power struggles that ruled the galactic hub. "Heart doesn't win wars," Ro said, though even the words felt hollow. Carter chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Maybe not on its own. But it keeps people going when the odds are against them. It's what makes the difference when everything else is falling apart." The conversation ended there, but the words stayed with Ro. They replayed in the child's mind as the days passed, and as the bond between Ro and the human crew deepened. The humans, despite their perceived weakness in the eyes of the galaxy, had something no one else did, a sense of togetherness, of community. And for Ro, who had spent so long alone, it was both alien and comforting. One day, Ro found themselves in the middle of the crew's mess hall, surrounded by the bustle of human life. The sounds of laughter, the clatter of dishes, the hum of conversation, it all felt so different from the cold, isolating existence Ro had known. The humans ate together, worked together, and more importantly, they looked out for one another. There was no ranking based on strength, no silent power struggles. Just camaraderie. Ro watched them with quiet fascination, unsure of where they fit in all of this. The humans had welcomed Ro, yes, but the child still felt out of place. Zorathians didn't have this connection. They had alliances, but they were built on strength, on power. Not on trust or care. "Hey, you want to join us?" One of the crew members, a woman named Maria, called out to Ro. She had been kind since the beginning, offering small gestures of warmth without asking for anything in return. Ro hesitated, glancing around the room before nodding. Slowly, the child approached the table, sitting down among the crew. For a moment, Ro was silent, unsure of how to act. But the humans didn't seem to mind. They just kept talking, laughing, and sharing stories of their home, Earth. "Earth is different," one of them said, a man named Davis. "It's a death world by galactic standards, but we thrive there. Always have. We adapt. That's the human way." Ro listened closely, absorbing the words. Earth. A place that sounded harsh and unforgiving, yet it had bred a species that valued compassion and unity over dominance. It didn't make sense, not in the way the galaxy worked. But maybe that was the point. The humans didn't follow the rules. They made their own. Maria turned to Ro, a curious smile on her face. What about you, Ro? What's your story? The question caught Ro off guard. The Zorathians didn't talk about their pasts, not unless it was to boast of victories. But here, among the humans, the question didn't feel like a challenge. It was just curiosity. I don't know, Ro said honestly, staring down at their hands. My people, we were strong once. Feared. But now we're nothing. I'm nothing. There was a brief silence at the table, but it wasn't uncomfortable. The humans exchanged glances, their expressions softening. It was Maria who spoke first. That's not true, she said gently. You're here. You've survived things most of us can't imagine. That's not nothing, Ro. That's everything. Ro looked up, meeting her gaze. There was no pity in her eyes, no judgment. Just understanding. You're part of this crew now, Carter added from across the table. And we look out for each other. No matter what. For the first time, Ro felt a sense of belonging, a feeling that maybe, just maybe, the humans were right. That strength wasn't the only thing that mattered. That being part of something, of a community, was a different kind of power. And maybe, that was enough. As the meal continued, Ro began to relax, listening to the humans' stories, even laughing at their jokes. The child still didn't have all the answers, still didn't know where their path would lead. But for the first time in a long while, Ro didn't feel lost. They didn't feel alone. And that was a start. As tensions escalated in the galaxy, reports of the Zorathian extinction spread like wildfire. Many factions began to view the Zorathians as a liability, a sign of weakness that could no longer be tolerated. Empires that had once stood beside them now sought to erase any trace of their legacy. Ro, living aboard the human ship, felt the weight of that fate looming, not just for their people, but for the crew that had become family. The day started like any other. Ro sat with the humans during breakfast, sharing laughter and stories about Earth's history. The warmth of their camaraderie enveloped Ro, but an unsettling chill snaked through the ship as news broke of an impending war. An alliance of alien factions had declared war on Earth, seeing the humans as the perfect scapegoat for the galaxy's troubles. The Zorathians passed as warriors hung like a specter over Ro's head, a reminder that their people were seen as weak. Lieutenant Carter addressed the crew with urgency. We need to prepare for the worst. Our enemies think they can take Earth without consequence, but they're underestimating us. We've faced adversity before, and we'll do it again. The humans rallied, their determination shining through the uncertainty. Ro watched, mesmerized. Here were these once dismissed humans, ready to face overwhelming odds because they believed in something greater than themselves. For the first time, Ro felt a stirring of hope. Days turned into weeks as the preparations unfolded. Ro trained harder than ever, their natural agility and latent telekinetic abilities blossoming under the guidance of the crew. Carter pushed them, not just to develop combat skills but to think strategically, to use their mind as much as their abilities. You have a gift, Carter said during one training session, his tone serious yet encouraging. You need to embrace it. The galaxy may have abandoned you, but you can't abandon yourself. You're more than just a Zorathian, you're part of this crew now. Ro felt the truth in those words. With each passing day, the child grew more confident, harnessing their powers to lift objects, create barriers, and even manipulate their surroundings. The crew began to see Ro not just as an alien child but as a valuable asset in the fight ahead. But the reality of war loomed larger every day. Alien fleets assembled in the vastness of space, their ships darkening the stars as they advanced toward Earth. The crew huddled in the briefing room, staring at the holographic display of the enemy fleet. We're outnumbered, Carter admitted, his jaw clenched. But we can't let that stop us. We'll use our knowledge of the terrain, our ingenuity. This isn't just a fight for Earth, it's for every species that's been cast aside. For the Zorathians! A ripple of agreement surged through the room. Ro's heart raced. They were fighting not just for survival but for something bigger, a chance to reclaim honor for their people, a chance to show that strength wasn't merely physical but a tapestry woven from unity and hope. As the enemy's ships closed in, Ro stood at the bridge, the hum of the ship vibrating through their body. The crew was tense, preparing for the worst. Ro focused, reaching deep within to tap into their abilities. "Remember what we practiced," Carter said, his voice steady amidst the chaos. "Ro, I need you to channel your energy when we engage. Use your instincts." With every ounce of strength, Ro concentrated, feeling the energy flow through them, the familiar warmth igniting in their core. The battle erupted. Explosions lit up the dark void of space as human ships engaged the enemy. Ro felt the tremors of the blasts but pushed through the fear. They sensed the panic of the crew, the determination to fight against the overwhelming odds. As the first enemy ship fell, Ro's instincts kicked in. They reached out, guiding debris and projectiles away from their crew, protecting them with a telekinetic barrier. The crew cheered as Ro deflected incoming fire, their abilities becoming an unexpected advantage. "Good work, Ro!" Maria shouted, her voice cutting through the din of battle. "Keep it up!" Ro nodded, the praise fueling their resolve. They began to feel the rhythm of the fight, a dance of chaos that they learned to navigate. As enemy ships fell, Ro harnessed their powers to create distractions, causing confusion within the ranks of the attackers. But the battle wasn't just about defending, it was about reclaiming. Ro remembered Carter's words, the notion of strength woven with purpose. They pushed forward, guiding the crew into the heart of the enemy fleet, their telekinetic abilities used not just defensively but offensively. With every command from Carter, Ro executed maneuvers that showcased their unique skills. Ro saw the fear in the enemy ships, the way they hesitated against the unforeseen tactics. The Zorathians were fighting back, not with brute force, but with the strength of a united front, something they had almost forgotten. Then, amidst the chaos, Ro noticed a familiar ship in the enemy fleet. It bore the insignia of their own people, a ship lost to the dark tide of war, commandeered by the very forces that had abandoned them. Ro's heart raced, recognizing the possibility to save what remained of their culture. "I can feel it!" Ro shouted to Carter. "That ship, it's Zorathian! We need to get to it!" Carter met Ro's gaze, understanding dawning in his eyes. "All right, we'll breach their defenses. But it'll be risky. Are you ready for that?" Ro took a deep breath, feeling the weight of their past collide with the future they were fighting for. "Yes." The crew rallied around Ro, focusing their firepower on the enemy ship. Ro pushed themselves further, summoning all their energy to create a pathway through the chaos. They directed the ship toward the Zorathian vessel, their telekinetic abilities shielding it from enemy fire. As they approached, Ro could see remnants of their people aboard, the once mighty Zorathians now little more than a few scattered souls, lost and afraid. "Let's go!" Carter shouted, leading the charge. Ro followed, their heart pounding with every step. They reached the Zorathian ship, the crew moving swiftly to board. Inside, Ro was struck by the sight of familiar faces, remnants of a race that had once stood tall among the stars. The Zorathians looked up, their expressions a mixture of hope and disbelief. "Ro!" one of them called out, a survivor from Ro's past. You're alive?" Ro nodded, emotions flooding in. "I'm here to help. We're fighting back." With the humans at their side, Ro began to rally the Zorathians. They spoke of unity, of reclaiming their legacy, not through strength alone but through resilience and community. The Zorathians listened, the spark of hope igniting in their eyes. Together, they strategized, formulating a plan that combined the ingenuity of humans with the innate abilities of the Zorathians. As they emerged back onto the battlefield, a renewed sense of purpose fueled Ro and the crew. The tide was turning. The humans and Zorathians fought side by side, creating an unstoppable force. Ro felt the surge of their powers, amplified by the belief of their people, their community. They were no longer just a child abandoned, they were a beacon of hope. The battle raged on, but now there was a a chance for survival, a chance for the Zorathians to reclaim their honor. Rose stood strong, surrounded by their newfound family, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As the enemy fleet began to falter, Rose knew this wasn't just a fight for Earth. It was a fight for the soul of their people, for every being that had ever been cast aside. And together they would show the galaxy that true strength lies not in fear and power but in unity and hope. The future would not be defined by the past. It would be forged in the fires of camaraderie and resilience, shining brighter than any star in the galaxy.